This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Wednesday Twilight show. I'm your host, Michelle, and joining me tonight is a committed educator and leader. Together, we will discuss whether or not we should scrap ability groupings. We'll talk about the stigmas, the challenges, and discuss whether or not there are benefits. Stay tuned.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello again, and welcome to the Wednesday Twilight Show. I can assure you that tonight we have a lovely show lined up for you, and hopefully you'll be able to take something away from it or join in by downloading the Podbean app, call in, or send us a message or a comment or a question when my guest joins later on, and we can talk about this, the topic for discussion tonight. However, I always like to, have a quick reflection on the previous show before we get started, just to make sure that we're kept abreast of what's happening with the Twilight Show and see if, how many people are really tuning in and engaging with the discussion. So I always like to start with a little bit of a reflection on the previous episode. So in the last episode, my guest and I explored the concept of teaching with tenacity. What helps with longevity in the classroom, and how do long-standing teachers maintain and sustain their passion? And my guest was none other than Stuart Lodge, who left us with some practical and insightful tips on how to maintain our sanity in the teaching profession. And he said things like, by seeing around the corner, planning ahead, and not being taken by surprise when certain issues arise. And he also talked about not to leave before the miracle happens. In other words, whatever the passion is about, or the vision, do not leave until it happens. Do not give up on our students. Now, for many people, that might be easier said than done, but that was some of the things he encouraged us to do. And he also said, get yourselves a pet. So I'd love to know if anybody has taken that advice and they've secured themselves a nice pet since the show, but I would love to hear about it. So that's where we left last time. And so tonight we are going to discuss a different kind of show. We are going to be discussing a different topic. And as I said at the start, I do hope that you will find this just as useful. So before I introduce our guest for tonight, who is a very talented educator and leader in her own right, before I introduce her tonight, I'd like to share the topic and just give you a little bit of a background to this topic. And this was taken from an article titled The Incidence and Makeup of Ability Groups Set in UK Primary Schools, but it also makes reference to secondary schools as well. According to the article, historically in England, at the primary level, ability grouping was commonplace. And children were grouped in classes according to ability, and some people might call that streaming, to ensure effective selection for different types of schooling at the secondary level. So that was one of the reasons for the setting back then at the primary level. But during the 1960s and 70s, according to the article, the introduction of comprehensive education, the demise of the 11 plus, research demonstrating no positive effects on average attainment, and the negative social consequences for pupils in the lower streams, and an increasing emphasis on equal opportunities, led to a decline in streaming in the primary school. So those were some of the factors that led to that. By the 1990s, the incidence of streaming was less than 3%, and mixed ability classes were the norm, although there may have been within class groupings in different school settings. So these are just some of the historical trends and background. The Education Reform Act saw the implementation of the national curriculum and an emphasis on raising standards. And I remember getting a copy of the national curriculum when I moved to the UK and read it almost cover to cover one summer. And what it stated was that ability grouping in the form of setting, that's pupils' ability grouped across classes for particular subjects, was perceived as a way to raise attainment, and schools were encouraged to introduce it. This was reinforced actually by the white paper, Excellence in Schools, which suggested that setting could be beneficial in raising standards and that setting should be the norm in secondary schools, in some cases, even in primary schools. So, setting from, according to government policies, is something that was encouraged. So, tonight we're going to really discuss our point of view, our perspectives on that as teachers ourselves, and even reflecting as students. How did this impact on us? What were the benefits? What are the challenges? And not just within the school setting, but outside of that as well. And before I go any further, I'm now going to pause and welcome and introduce tonight's guest. A very special guest indeed. I was so impressed with her bio when she sent it. And so tonight's guest is Miss Nikki Panayodu. Now, Nikki, I really hope I haven't butchered your name. I've been practicing the pronunciation, so do correct me when you come online. You can correct me. I know you're already there, but when you speak to us, please forgive me as well. So Nikki trained as a teacher after completing a degree in politics and women's studies in New Zealand. She worked in a comprehensive school in Essex for 7 years and developed a passion for teaching English, especially to young people with social, emotional, and mental health difficulties and special educational needs. This experience motivated her to pursue a master's degree in social justice in education, focusing primarily on the impact of restorative justice as a whole school approach to behavior. This passion has led to some admirable accomplishments, such as the completion of a national award and Senate advisor for a local borough. Very impressive. She didn't stop there because having these experiences raised her awareness of the overrepresentation of minority students, special needs, and other disadvantaged groups in exclusions, both fixed and permanent. Her drive in this field led her to her current role in a pupil referral unit in London, where she has been for the last 10 years. Now, I'm sure you'll agree with me, listeners, that this is a sign of true passion and commitment, and we have to give that to Nikki. However, aside from her academic and professional accomplishments, she is a proud and doting mother to 2 beautiful daughters. Welcome to the show, Nikki, and I do look forward to hearing our discussion.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, loud and clear. Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Oh, I was very impressed with myself. What a bio.
Yeah, and I think you were being modest. I'm sure there is even more, Nikki, but this, I'm telling you, is mind blowing to read. And thank you so much for coming on the show tonight to share your expertise with us. So before we get into the questions, we're going to pause for a very short break and we'll be right back. Those of you who've already joined, wherever you've joined from, thank you so much. Do spread the word. Share the link with somebody else and let them join in as well. Remember to download the Podbean app so you can call in or send us a comment or ask a question. Do stay tuned.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Meet USA Study, your one-stop platform for guiding students through their college application journey. Access up-to-date resources on universities, programs, scholarships, and application requirements, all in one place. Get easy-to-access tools, personalised timelines, expert tips, application templates, and exclusive webinars with admissions officers to help your student stand out. Visit usastudy.co.uk or call Phil at 0800 612 8271 because every student deserves the opportunity to shine with USA Study.
And there you have it, our sponsors for tonight. So welcome again, Nikki. And just a reminder to those who are listening and those who are online, hopefully joining us was not too difficult for anyone who is with us tonight. And for those of you who are just joining, just a reminder of the topic for tonight, and it is Beyond the Labels, Should We Rethink Ability Grouping in Education? So welcome again, Nikki. Nikki, you want to tell us the correct pronunciation of your surname, please?
I was very impressed, actually.
Great. I've been so nervous all afternoon,
No.
Nikki. Going, oh my God, am I going to get it right?
I had the chance to marry it away, but I chose to keep my name because it's so difficult.
Good on you.
Yeah, so I kept it. So it's a Greek Cypriot name, and it's Panayiotou.
Panayiotou.
Yeah.
Beautiful name, unique as well. So I totally agree. You keep it. But if you don't mind sharing, what would have been your marital name?
It would have been Rundle. I would have had a very English name.
Yes, I think I prefer the Greek name.
I think so.
Panayiotou. Yes, great. So thank you so much for sparing the time. And we're going to get straight into the questions because I kid you not, the 90 minutes go by so quickly, Nikki, especially when we're having some really inspiring discussions. So the first section, we're going to talk about understanding ability grouping and what do we mean by that. So can you explain, in your opinion and from your experience, what ability grouping is and how it typically works in schools?
So my experience in mainstream school would be that classes would be streamed, and it would be a kind of data set that would start with maybe SATs exams or CATS exams that were sat in year 7. And then classes would be streamed or set from a top set to a bottom set, middle set, according to the outcome of those assessments. There's basically what that is in a nutshell. In some schools, it's a fait accompli. So this is what you are, this is where you stay, and that's your kind of journey throughout that school. And in some schools, they've got a kind of mixed approach. So it's more that kind of assess, plan, do, review model where we've got these outcomes, we've set the classes, but then maybe we have mobility between the sets. So, yeah, it's roughly what it is.
Yeah. I agree. That sums it up. So, but there's a slight difference between streaming and setting. And within that, we've got, as you said, there could be top set, lower set, and then sometimes we have mixed abilities, don't we? Depending on the school as well. So according to research, streaming is where pupils are differentiated according to general ability. So it's not subject specific. So sometimes it's worked out based on an average, and then you're streamed accordingly for all subjects. You're in that particular stream. Whereas setting is where pupils are allocated to ability groups within particular subjects. And then we've got the mixed ability, where we've got a mixture of abilities in the one class. And now lots of educators are listening, so you know exactly what we're talking about. And this is just to clarify for those who are listening who are not in education. Now, my experience, Nick, and I'll ask you about yours in a minute, in secondary or high school back in Jamaica, is that I think we were streamed. Now that I'm an adult, looking back, I think it was done based on streaming. So, for example, for my own experience in primary school, I was considered to be bright. And so I was in the bright class. So in Jamaica, there's no buffer. You're either in the bright class or what they actually called the dunce class. Now, I don't think the teachers called it that, but as students, that's how we refer to it as. You're bright class or you're dunce class. And so from primary school, that was established, to be honest. And So in primary school, I was supposed to be in that stream. So I did the equivalent of the 11 plus. Went to secondary school, and I don't know how they arrived at that, but I was put in a lower stream.
Mm.
And yet I excelled in English and the humanities and some of the sciences. Maths was my weakness. And I don't know if that was the determining factor, but that's where I was placed.
Mm.
And that carried on right through until I chose my subjects, my options for year 10. And then I moved up a bit. But for some reason, and I think I have to give credit to my parents who made sure I was kept motivated and just kept my focus and my dreams and aspirations going. It didn't really bother me academically because I still did really well. I think how it impacted on me really was more socially because, yeah, you began to think, oh, wait a minute. So I'm in this set because those other girls are intellectually superior. But at the same time, I was still on par in so many ways, but still kept in that particular set. But later on in the show, we'll talk about the social implications and all of that. So that was my experience. So I don't know if you want to share with us. Did you study your high school years in New Zealand or some of that in the UK?
So I had quite a strange experience. I went to primary school in New Zealand, which is famously inclusive. All primary schools are mixed ability. They're not streamed. They're not set. And then I went to Cyprus, where I went to a kind of private school, and they were set. So, and there was an entry exam, and then you were in the top, middle, or lower set. And I stayed there for 5 years, and then I came back to New Zealand, and in this high school in New Zealand, I was in the top set. But I was in the top set, and I didn't know why. Okay, and there was no assessment. So I was trying to think, like, how did I get to the top set in that high school of mine? I think they just thought my mum was a teacher.
Okay.
And then I was placed in the top set. There was no an entry exam. There was nothing that would put me in that top set. And the irony is, one of my best friends is she's her name is Sarai Barrowman. She's the head of women's FIFA. She was in the bottom set in my year group, and she's probably one of the most powerful women in football at this moment in time. And we've talked about this a lot. It was completely arbitrary, the way that we were set. So it was a positive experience for the students in the top set. But if you were in the bottom set in the early 90s, in that kind of middle-class school in Auckland, New Zealand, wasn't easy.
Yeah. And I experienced a bit of that on the social level. It's not because, the students who begin to realize, oh, wait a minute, we're top set. Oh, we've got this superiority. Whether consciously or unconsciously, subconsciously rather, they began to exemplify those traits. Of being above. And it showed in their interactions with the rest of us and how they grouped themselves as well. And, how they took on all the leadership roles, whole school. So it was very interesting to observe. And let me just add here that this is my opinion and this was my experience. If anybody's listening who went to my high school, that was my experience. Yeah, that was my experience. Let me clarify.
Important caveat.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that was a well-needed caveat. So what do you think? So we've talked about ability groupings and we've established that you're streamed according to your abilities. So what are the perceived benefits of ability groupings for students and teachers, in your opinion?
I've thought about this a lot, and I think that, there is the kind of more salient sort of academic argument that we must have mixed ability at all times, and that, it's an either or, it's either something that's really bad or really good. And I think that from what I've experienced and what I've seen, both as a teacher and as a SEN advisor and now at the Pru, is that having a classroom where there's absolute total mixed ability, so you've got a huge swathe of need at the top and at the bottom, is something that can be completely impractical. and really complex for a teacher to manage. But if you have a situation in which you use the appropriate tools to say, let us coalesce this group together, but not have it as a fait accompli. In other words, there is mobility between sets, or between the sort of sets within subjects or across the curriculum. I think that's a bit more helpful and practical. So I had this really amazing experience, I think, which kind of started my journey. And I was in a big state school comprehensive in Essex. I'd just come off the plane from Auckland, New Zealand, and arrived in Essex, and I'd never known anything like it. It was really, really different.
Culture shock?
Yes, if anyone knows New Zealand, it's hugely multicultural place. It's a place where when you teach or train, you do your mandatory training is to train around designing a curriculum around the cultures in your classroom. So, I mean, it is an inclusive approach to education in New Zealand. And then I came to a school in Essex where every subject had a top, middle, bottom set. It was quite rigid. But then we had a fantastic head of English arrive. The assessments that they used were, your SATs results. Now, if you think about SATs results, it's one day in your life. You arrive, you're a child. There are so many factors that will interact with your experience and your outcomes on that assessment. But there were so many decisions made on that data set, and it seemed mind-boggling to me when I arrived. So this head of English, Margaret Hodge, an amazing human being, she decided to have a kind of blended approach when it came to ability. So there were two factors that she realised were impacting on the outcomes of students. Like the girls were underachieving a lot. So there's mainly a homogenous school in terms of culture. So it was a white working class school. Working class boys, notoriously underachieving in the school. White working class girls, really underachieving. And the kind of middle class cohort were kind of muddling along. So the picture was kind of odd. So what she did was she took the year 10, year 11 year group, and she decided to arrange them around gender.
Okay.
And ability, right? So to get my head around that was quite interesting. So there was we looked at CATS results and we coalesced around cognitive ability, okay? So then we had a set. So I got it was the bottom group, but they didn't feel that way, which is probably something that we'll come on to. And they were boys. There was 15 of them, and I had extra time with them. So they sat the GCSEs. They had the same curriculum offer, but the level of need sort of coalesced, if you like. So I could teach and differentiate at a kind of manageable pace, and something that I could take more time with because I had more contact time with them. And it was absolutely incredible. It was an incredible situation because it challenged a lot of my assumptions about the group.
Nikki, can I explore that a little bit more? Because you said they were then set according to gender.
Yes.
And then you said the bottom group were boys.
Yep. And then my colleague had the girls.
Was that a girls' bottom group?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought the bottom group was just made up of boys because that's a whole other issue. Oh dear.
Sorry, no. Boys and girls, yeah. Because what they realised that the girls were being drowned out, and I know that the research kind of says that they were quiet, they weren't accessing learning, they were disappearing. So my colleague, an incredible woman, Vanessa Sheen, she took the girls and created this kind of girls group approach. So in the end, the way that the way that they were identified around ability and gender, that was the beginning of the story, really. And it was what we did and how we did it. So it was about creating a culture in the classroom, that I had to basically sell them English. So, and it was also to understand where they were and who they were. So I got a very amazing HLTA who lived in the village, had been working in the school for 40 years. She taught their parents, she taught their children, grandparents. She was amazing, and she knew the local culture, the local issues, and she encouraged me to use their lived experience. So all that training from New Zealand, where you have a kind of approach to pedagogy, which is around being culturally responsive and inclusive, I applied that to the class. So it looked like things like writing to argue. There was a big deal that that Stansted was going to expand because it was a local village around Stansted, and everyone, it was a kitchen sink conversation. Everybody had strong views. There were posters all around the village. There were signs everywhere. And so that is what I designed my scheme of work around. And they really engaged in it. So then the SPAG and the devices for writing to argue and all that kind of technical stuff that just happened to be woven in. And we really got to know each other, and we became a small little community. And it was really quite amazing. So it starts off with ability setting and setting around gender, and then becomes something quite inclusive.
Yeah. Sounds amazing. But Nikki, don't you think having the same approach with a mixed ability group could also have been successful? Or do you think the fact that they were in ability groups and gender is solely responsible for that, or would only be successful with that model? Or do you think that model could be applied to a mixed ability group?
I think it could be applied to a mixed ability group, but I think I do think that it was, certainly as a teacher, a lot. It was manageable to be able to have the needs coalesce sort of in a similar kind of way. I mean, it was really, I had mixed ability groups in year 8 and year 9, and it was a totally different kind of experience. And a lot of the time, you'd have the top not being stretched, the bottom not being challenged. And there was a real feeling of guilt that I had as a teacher a lot of the time, that I was meeting needs, but I wasn't stretching and challenging. So, in other words, do I think it should be that extreme? Absolutely not. But I think that if there is some way to be able to kind of accept that there could be the beginning starts with looking at ability and then making these decisions, but not having it as a fait accompli, as in you may move around and be mobile.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I've been doing some research on school effectiveness, and one of the factors raised by a number of researchers is context. And so as you were describing that, I was thinking, it really also depends on the school's context and where the school is at. And for you also bringing in that cultural capital as well, and their lived experiences into the learning surely seem to have helped as well. But it is so important, as you said, that it's not rigid and that there is room for movement as well, and that you don't say to this child, this is where you will be and this is where you'll be for the rest of your journey in secondary school. That there should be that flexibility as well, and room to accommodate the growth. That a lot of these children will really work hard to be moved up sets if they're in a school that subscribes to that.
I mean, in that cohort, something really interesting happened. A young boy arrived, and it was my first contact with the wild, wild west of Prus, because he was reintegrated into our school from the local pupil referral unit. And again, there was an assumption about him. Without any assessments, he was placed in my group, which was perceived as the lower ability group. But it was really clear that he was bright as a button, actually. And it's that classic situation where his kind of attitude towards himself, attitude towards learning, his kind of self-perception was impacting on his behaviours in the classroom. So because we had that kind of family, high contact approach, a lot of nurture, he began to trust me. So then I convinced him to resit a screener that we had done so I could demonstrate, look, he's really bright. He needs to be able to move around or have access to a different set or whatever. And I remember meeting with the parents and they refused to move him. And he refused to move. And it struck me that for him, his needs and his abilities, right, were being met somehow in that classroom. For him, it was his social, emotional, mental health difficulties that were being addressed, understood, and met. So it's such an interesting area of education. I mean, you would think, right, you need to go up. Come on, let's go. No. I need to be here in this small classroom. But I think
Because he felt safe, right? He felt safe and he felt belonged as well.
Yeah. And the decision making isn't based on his ability, it's based on what he needs.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. So we're going to go on to the challenges and drawbacks. And I'm sure you've taught in different settings where it's either mixed ability or set according to ability. And critics argue that ability groupings reinforce social inequalities. And we mentioned a little bit of that earlier. But I'd like to have your take on this. So while you think about it a little bit, Nikki, let me just welcome those who've just joined. Thank you so much and welcome to the Wednesday Twilight Show. Do share your thoughts. Koshia, hello, you're in line. Thank you for joining. Do share your thoughts. If you have a comment or a question, we're talking about ability groupings. Is it time to rethink it? What are the benefits? What are the disadvantages? Hi, Mariana. So good to have you as well. And everybody else who's listening from wherever you are, thank you so much. I appreciate that you've taken the time to join us tonight with my amazing guest, Nikki. So, Nikki, what do you think? Do they reinforce social inequalities? And what is your take?
So the interesting experience I had in that same school was that and this is about the teaching staff, I became the teacher that was the teacher of the bottom set.
Okay.
Right. So then it was, this is Nikki's cohort. And it suddenly struck me that I was looked over for top sets all the time and every year. No, this is what Nikki does. This is her strength. This is where she needs to be. And actually kind of like tacitly that whilst that model was good for the students, it kind of did create an inequality amongst the staff who teach those sets and the staff that teach the top set. So by chance, there was a top set English class and the teacher had left the school and we were only 6 months into year 10. So there was 2 years to get them through their GCSE. So the head of English said, I want to give you this opportunity. And I thought, oh wow, thanks for that. Wow. And I remember going into that classroom and there definitely was amongst that top set a real complacency about their privilege and what they felt that they were in the school. And it annoyed me. So I had a kind of a bit of a radical approach. At that time, I was studying towards the Masters in Social Justice. So I decided to teach privilege, texts that were around social justice, inequality to the students to make their privilege more visible to them. And it had this kind of like radical effect where the students were like, I can't believe that there's racism. Yes, there is. I can't believe that there is. Yes, there is. And you are part of that. Wow. And it's our responsibility to make this world fair and to look at things from that perspective. So from, I don't know if I changed all of their attitudes, but I certainly saw firsthand the outcomes that ability groupings can have. I mean, the attitude in that top set was quite something else.
And not just the attitude of the students, but then the the unconscious bias as well of the school to think that this is where you belong. And actually, I experienced that as well. And Kosha just mentioned the same thing, Nikki, that she taught in a school for 7 years and had a similar experience. It wasn't until a teacher left that she was able to experience teaching what we call a top set class. And when I moved to the UK, that was a discussion I had with other foreign nationals where we felt as though we were given those classes a lot. Oh, yes, because, you're strong and you're strict and you're Jamaican and you're New Zealander, you're Kiwi, you're tough, you're strong, you can handle this. And that's the experience a lot of us have had. And it's almost as though you had to show yourself and prove that you could actually teach more able students.
Well, I had to be sold because
you didn't want to move on. You didn't want to try another group.
No,
you shouldn't say move on.
But I had to be sold to the parents because there was a long-standing member of staff who had lots of social capital in the school and the school community. It's a small village, like a small village school. It's a totally different kettle of fish to a kind of inner city London school or an outer London school. Mm-hmm. And the parents were saying, who is this teacher? Is she able to do it? I mean, it was a fascinating experience. But you know what? The students had a kind of like a more radical experience with their curriculum. Mm-hmm. And I used to do after school classes, extra classes, because I was worried that the teacher had left, that they hadn't had enough access to the curriculum. And they would all turn up to these classes. And half of the classes was teaching them the kind of techniques for unseen poetry, which, oh my God, teaching that's a nightmare. Mm-hmm. But the second half of the lesson was around issues around social justice. So it became this kind of like citizenship group, which was all around their critical thinking. Mm-hmm. So but you see, the ability setting was the start of the story, really.
Yes.
It was how I, as a teacher, approached it pedagogically, and it was also how the school approached it.
Exactly. Yeah. So the thing is, Nikki, I completely agree with you because I like having the mixture, and at the moment I have some mixed ability groups, and it is a challenge sometimes to really get to all of the students and to stretch and challenge them. And I think this is where CPD comes in handy and where the school really thinks about this carefully and help teachers to be the best that they could possibly be and ensure that all the students sitting in front of them access the curriculum. And it is doable and it is hard work. Now, I enjoy teaching those students that we term, and I really hate the term bottom and lower. I'm really thinking of, is there a better term out there for this? But I enjoy teaching these students because I find that they have character. They often approach their education as if I have nothing to lose, I am open to anything, and I'm willing to share what's on my mind. Where I find the higher ability students are a little bit more guarded and they're a bit more cautious. And so you were talking about that earlier, where they're probably not so keen to share their opinions because of fear of being wrong and not getting it right. Whereas I usually find the so-called lower ability students to have a lot more spirit and character. And Kosha is saying, ironically, she's now teaching in a Peru where having taught the lower ability students for years has really come in handy now in terms of nurturing those students. But what has been your experience when you think about it, if you reflect? Do you agree that sometimes our higher ability students are a little less willing to be open with us and share?
What in a relational sense, like how they relate to their teacher in the classroom, or?
Oh no, just in terms of teaching and learning. You ask a question and they're a little bit more reluctant to open up because nobody wants to get it wrong, because they have to maintain the status. Whereas the lower ability students, they just share, whether they're right or wrong. They've got spirit.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that, and I think, you know, that is the thing that needs to be encouraged in the lesson. It's part of the learning that actually you must participate in this discussion. You know, your voice is valued, and it is something that has to be addressed explicitly in middle to top sets, I suppose. That your participation and your voice is important, and also mandatory.
Yes,
So come on,
exactly.
let me hear what you have to say. But I think to the kind of discussion about having no ability grouping whatsoever and mixed ability classes. The sad reality is, and I know this as the Senko at the Pru that I'm at, and looking at the cohort, is that the vast majority of the students who are permanently excluded are students who cannot access the curriculum, and who have been placed in classes where the language, the ability required, and the curriculum is really, really above their heads. You know, so it's the classic. Why is the child who's got the reading age of a 7-year-old stuck in a French class? And I think on a human level, right, when you see the trauma of that outcome on a human level on a day-to-day basis, it makes you think a bit differently, you know, because once they arrive, our work is around developing their sense of self as learners. You know, you are a learner. You can learn. Of course you can. And that is exhausting, and it can be rewarding, but it is something that was unnecessary. I mean, permanent exclusion is a very complex area, and there are a lot of co-occurring needs around it. But in terms of for this discussion, the outcomes speak for themselves, and it would be something that would be very interesting to capture a national picture of the true ability, or the kind of breadth of need, or the kind of area of need of the students being permanently excluded. I only know from our experience when I arrived in Enfield, which is my borough. Big ups to Enfield. Love you, Enfield. Don't know how I arrived here, but okay, this is me now. I was the special needs advisor for secondary schools. I was following students from school to school with special needs, undiagnosed special needs. I was following them from one managed move to another managed move to another managed move, and they were going into the pupil referral unit. So I said to myself, as soon as a job comes up, I need to put myself there, because these are the children I need to serve. And I need to understand what is going on. And that was in 2015. And one of the first things that I did was I conspired with a speech and language therapist. It was a very passionate lady. We were two very passionate ladies at the time. And we convinced the head teacher to allow us to do a screener of all the students for speech and language difficulties. And 85% of the population had significant speech, language, and communication difficulties.
Wow.
So the level of need is significant. And then there's things where you hear the stories, and it's always repetitive a lot of the time. I didn't understand what the teacher was saying. She did these instructions. I couldn't keep up with the lesson. I don't understand this class. And I think that is a human experience that needs to be listened to and understood a bit more, I think, both academically, you know,
And socially.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Thank you so much. And we had a flurry of comments coming through, Nikki, while you were speaking. Kosha said, spot on, absolutely correct. She also agreed that she loves teaching her lower ability groups. It's hard work sometimes, but it really helps her as well to get them to develop more socially and have social awareness. Mariana, who is actually reaching out all the way from Romania. Hi, Mariana. She said she loves teaching mixed ability groups, but it has to be small groups so she could give them individual help and challenge to all. And You're welcome, Mariana. She said, thanks for the show. So you are right. And, we set the students. And, I remember you said you ended up in the top set, Nikki, when you started secondary school and you couldn't understand why. And it's so important that as educators, we think about all these factors that make the child who they are before we make these decisions, because then it could impact on their mindset. And then based on that mindset, that's the behavior that follows them, because that's the expectation we have of them. And so many times, I don't think it's happening as often today. I hope not. Students are set according to behavior. I'm going to move you to the lower ability class because you can't behave yourself. And you're right, as you said, it'd be good to do an action research and see really these children's true ability, but that's clouded and shrouded in these low expectations of our students sometimes.
And that experiment could not have worked if I had a child with a higher ability but who had behavioural difficulties. Yeah. If that child arrived at that class of 14 of my students, it would not have worked, because actually we are coalescing around their ability. Okay, fine, but the curriculum is designed for them. And actually, thinking about cultural capital, I remember designing really exciting things for them, and the top set complaining.
Well, it's too exciting.
It was because I needed to invent creative ways to engage them. So the old classic, any English teacher will say, teaching PEA, oh my God, it can be the driest thing. But what I did was, I knew that a lot of them were visual learners, so I decided to teach them about a local artist, John Constable. He used to just paint these beautiful oil paintings, I think, or watercolors. I can't remember. I'm not an art historian. About the local area. Then I taught them about Banksy, the Monet that has the trash in the river with the trolley. And so I asked them to design their own Banksy using something that Constable had drawn or painted in their local area, design it, and then write me a PEA. And then I did a gallery exhibition of their work, on a display with their PEA paragraphs. I told the staff to look at it, to talk to them about it in other lessons. And the top set really felt hard done by.
In what way?
Why do they get to do those things and we don't get to do those things? And it really, that kind of real sense of privilege was so invisible to them, that making their privilege visible to them was something that I felt I needed to do to create a kind of sense of equality,
So they felt left out because they weren't having this kind of hands-on activity, or is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So,
wow.
Why are they doing a speaking? So I knew they all loved horror, for instance. So I designed a lesson around Psycho, the old black and white film. And they had to do a monologue. So I started off with them coming into the classroom, just playing that famous music. What do you think? What do you feel? And then building it up so that they know about Norman Bates. And then they wrote his monologue in the scene when he first meets the lady that he goes on to murder. And the top set were doing monologues that were kind of more bog standard.
Yes.
They didn't have that kind of build-up. I mean, maybe that's probably something I should have thought about. But they were really hard. They felt really hard done by. But the students in that class felt special and seen, and they really engaged in it. And I mean, I've still got, and this is 10 years ago, I still have their monologues.
Wow.
And
Fantastic. Nikki, I love the way that you incorporate local information and local news and so on in your lessons to engage students. And I think we shouldn't let our top sets feel as though everything that they do has to be by the book. And we should also incorporate the creativity to keep them motivated as well. And maybe in mixed ability groups, we would be more prone to do that. But, we can't let our higher ability students just stick to the 20 minutes of writing and no creativity as well. We're going to take a short break. And then when we come back, we've already talked about the social inequalities and the possibilities of reinforcing that. So when we come back, we're going to talk about whether or not ability groupings disproportionately impact students from disadvantaged backgrounds. And Nikki has done some work around that. So we just want to explore that a little bit more. Those of you who are online, thank you so much. Remy, hi, thanks for joining. And do stay tuned. We're just going to go for a short break.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Meet USA Study, your one-stop platform for guiding students through their college application journey. Access up-to-date resources on universities, programs, scholarships, and application requirements, all in one place. Get easy-to-access tools, personalised timelines, expert tips, application templates, and exclusive webinars with admissions officers to help your student stand out. Visit usastudy.co.uk or call Phil at 0800 612 8271 because every student deserves the opportunity to shine with USA Study.
Okay, thank you very much for staying tuned and for joining in. Thanks for all the comments and the hellos. Thank you so much for also liking the show. So tonight we're talking about ability groupings. What are the merits? Are there stigmas attached to these groupings? How do they impact on our young people, knowing what sets they're in? How does it impact on us as teachers as well, in the way we prepare to deliver to these students? So we're going to continue, and believe it or not, as I said before, Nikki, the time does go by quickly, and we still have the news to listen to. So we're going to go through as quickly as possible, cover as much as possible. So do you think ability groupings disproportionately impact students from disadvantaged backgrounds? And would you be able to share some of your observations on that, please?
Well, I think it's a really complex issue. In the example I've given to you about that lower ability setting, there were some things that were facts really, and that I was doing targeted support, right? And I knew that there was lower engagement, and I knew that there was an issue around confidence, and I was working on my bias, and I was kind of aware of the fact that there were lower expectations. So in a kind of sense, I was kind of working out what I was studying at the same time on these boys. Mm-hmm. That's because I'd gone to study social justice at the Institute of Education.
Yep.
And so these were the things that I was aware of when I was dealing with that class. In a mixed ability group, if you have a teacher who does not understand the importance of targeted support, right? If they are not aware of things around lower engagement, confidence, if they don't understand what the breadth of needs are and what must be done to address those, it can disproportionately affect minoritized students and disadvantaged students. Absolutely. It can reinforce structural inequalities. So I think that if a school makes a decision to get away with ability setting and have a totally mixed ability approach, there has to be a lot of work around teachers understanding what needs to be done in those classrooms so that students don't coast or disappear or have like low expectations crystallize.
Yeah. I completely agree. And I'm going to take it back even a step further to teacher training providers. I was trained in Jamaica, and we do have modules on how to teach mixed ability groups. Well, when I trained way back in the day. So I don't know what the situation is like now, but I also think teacher training should incorporate that as well, to equip teachers to manage the different abilities that they will come across.
Yeah.
It is so important, because sometimes, we put teachers in front of a classroom, but we haven't really equipped them properly to go and deliver. And as you said, do those targeting teaching and learning and pedagogical things. We haven't trained them properly, but you just expect it to happen. Or you tell them, oh, this is what you do, but do they really know? Do they understand? And then we end up shortchanging our students.
Well, I remember being in the staff room all those years ago, and a teacher said to me, "Oh, how are those boys doing? They're not going to get very far." Kind of quite disparaging about them. And they are doing well. I'm actually showing my age now. They are business owners. They are dads.
Yes.
They are.
Yeah.
They are doing really well. They've reached out to me. We still have contact with them. Now, if that teacher that spoke to me in that way in that staff room was in front of those boys, it would have had such an adverse impact.
Exactly.
On their outcomes. And they were very, very working class students. In that cohort, they were the disadvantaged group, really, which is why we had to have that radical approach.
Yeah, which seems like a really successful program, by the way, Nikki. So that was brilliant. And that was some great vision from the head of department, actually.
But again, that was because of the input that I was getting as a teacher that she knew of, and that actually she realized that I would have this particular approach, that I would differentiate. I would have high expectations. We had a community-based learning. It was just she knew that. But if there was a kind of a teacher who doesn't believe in differentiation, who thinks that we should just be taught in one particular way and has that kind of didactical approach to learning, then do I think that they would have done well? I don't think so. I think that that approach has to be taught. And for mixed ability groups, it's really, really important, I think.
That the right teacher is in front of them, the teacher who will believe in them no matter what. I taught in a coastal school once, and I remember when the mock exam results came out, and my lower ability students did really well. And the questions were asked, Michelle, how come they've done so well in English? They didn't question my marking so much, because by this, I was in my 15th year of marking for the exam board. So I said to the students, explain to me, how is it you've done so well in English and you're not doing well in the other subjects? And one student, I'll never forget her, Daisy, bless her heart. She said, "Yes, miss, that's because you don't think we're thick.
Yeah.
And you don't treat us as if we're thick, so we get on with it." And I remember the TA was in the room, and she looked at me and she smiled. And afterwards she said, she is so right. Because so many other teachers, they've put a glass ceiling on these girls and go, yeah, you won't amount to much, even if that's not really expressed explicitly, but it's okay. We'll just give you the bare minimum. And just as you said about your students, those girls left with their 4s, 5s, and one girl got 2 6s. So it is so important that as teachers as well, we have high expectations for all our students. I'm giggling a little bit, Nikki, because I have a year 8 class, and every day before the lesson, I whisper a prayer, because I have to be very firm with them. But I feel as though, and I say this to my colleagues, the generation gap is so wide for me now that it's difficult to relate to 12-year-olds. But so I said to them today, I said, class, I've come in here with a new mindset. I want you to have a brilliant lesson, and I want us to get along. And one cheeky boy at the back went, "Me too, miss." I've come with,
I'm here too.
I've come with a new mindset. But I kid you not, Nikki, within minutes, I was already telling off that boy just to keep still and sit in his seat and pay attention. But it's still something I look forward to, and marking their exam papers and seeing the progress that they're making is amazing. So colleagues, if you're listening, let's give them a chance and, try to understand where they're coming from as well, and to look at the contextual factors that maybe, or the social factors, the SEN needs that may be impacting on performance.
I mean, I remember my head teacher, the head of English, saying to me that if we're going to do this, then the strongest teachers are going to go with the bottom set. And
Yes.
my best and brightest with that cohort. And I think that is the key, because often it's a sync class, a sync teacher, curriculum,
and that's a transformational leader right there, because the top set kids will do it no matter what.
Yeah.
They will do it because they will go out and source the information if they feel as though they're not getting all the information that they need. And it's the lower ability students that really depend on us to come in and be the expert in the room. I completely agree. So I'm going to move on to alternative approaches. And we've covered some of these questions already. So I'm just going to move on to, what role do you think mixed ability classrooms play in fostering collaboration and growth? Because there are some merits to mixed ability classes. What do you think?
Oh, 100%, you know. I mean, it creates richer classroom discussions, doesn't it? Because you've got a mixed ability group, and they've got like mixed experiences, mixed relationships of learning. So, I mean, it creates a kind of really rich and dynamic classroom if managed well, with a teacher who understands the importance of, you know, having those high expectations, having a really strong and secure grasp of what differentiation is. So I think that the other aspect to it is mixed ability groups. I've found in my experience, you can apply those kinds of principles around the restorative classroom, you know, and that kind of community-based learning. Like, we are a community. Everybody here is different, just like the world is. And so we are going to have a democratic classroom. We're going to have a classroom that is about community. So you can really foster amazing cultures, I think. With the top set, just going back to how they felt they were hard done by, once the privilege was taken away from them, i.e. they could see that somebody else was getting a better deal, they're really quick to say, this is my right to have this. This is what I've always had. So why is it that they over there? Now, that othering, you know, they shouldn't be getting that. That is our right. That cannot be good. That cannot be good. So I think that mixed ability classes sort of stop that kind of attitude in its tracks, because actually it's egalitarian, isn't it? We're all here, we're all getting the same thing. We can help each other, we can support each other, and we can collaborate. So, you know, argument both.
And there's a popular saying that rising tide lifts all ships in support of mixed ability groups, that if you're teaching to the top, then the others will definitely be carried up as well with that approach. But I'm also guilty of this, where in a mixed ability group, I then set my students within my classroom.
Yes. I know, that's the thing. So I know. A mixed ability class, but I've got this table over here, and then this table over here, and then this table over here. So there's sort of like the kind of what we would like to say about ourselves and feel about ourselves and teachers, and then there's the kind of reality of what's going on. And sometimes it's uncomfortable to say it out loud, that actually I have a mixed ability group, but then I do something, you know?
Oh, yeah. That famous middle table with all the B and above students, and then the others are looking around at each other and going, what? So, Miss, why am I at this table?
Yeah. Because if you put the boy or the girl, see, that's an unconscious bias. So I said the top. Yes. So you put there you go. You put the boy.
Well, Nikki corrected quickly. That's okay.
So I live in an environment in my school where I have to check myself all the time. Come on, Nikki, do better.
Yes.
I remember I tried in a mixed ability group to do, I'm going to have totally differentiated groups, right? So I put this really, really, really whizzy boy. He was like on track to get an A star. Now I'm telling you my age, because that's the data I was dealing with, A's, B's, C's, and A's and A stars. With a boy that was sort of, and it was another boy, actually. That's not an unconscious bias thing. It was about a C, and they argued with each other, and it was really, really difficult. And I had to really support their interactions because they were not used to it. right? So in every other classroom, he was on that table with others that were like him. And in my classroom, suddenly there was a boy who kind of had a different ability to him, and he
Yeah.
wasn't able to cope with it. So it's like you can become an island sometimes, and it has to be a whole school agreed approach to what we're going to do about ability. Because
Yeah, I
that was
completely
really
agree.
tricky. Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
that really clearly.
And there needs to be a meaningful discussion around it, and not just something to fix in the moment, but something that will think about the far-reaching effects as well. So where I am currently, the classes are set well for year 11. For Key Stage 3, the first, we've got top sets, and then everything else, all the other classes are mixed ability groups. But year 11 is still on the older system. And so we've got sets 1 to 8. And I teach set 8. And they would constantly ask me, what set is this? And I would respond, why is that important? And I would never tell them. I said, it doesn't matter. You're doing English language like everybody else. The exam is not tiered, it's the one paper. So, what is the difference here? And when they were now getting grade 5s in their mocks, and 4 and above, they stopped asking for a while. And I think it was Monday, I heard one boy saying to another girl, is it true that we're set 8? And before she responded, she looked at me, and I said to him, I don't know where you got that from, but okay, so if you're labeled set 8, what does it mean to you? Does it mean you're no longer going to get that 5 that you had in 2 consecutive mock exams? And he went quiet. So it really does impact on them, and they think about it and they begin to feel inferior. And as you said before, Nikki, the students in the so-called top set, they feel entitled, and they will also rub it in the faces of our lower ability students and call them names. Oh, you're in set 8, haha.
Yeah, and your job as a teacher is to kind of remarket yourself and
Yes.
say, "Hey, no, I remember saying to those boys, we're this set or whatever," and I said, "No, you're my students. This is
Yes.
my class. This is Miss," because they couldn't pronounce my name, by the way. They used to call me Miss P. This is Miss P's English class. All right, I don't know what you're talking about. And then that's when that whole, this is our community, that kind of creating an identity, creating a culture, this is who we are in this moment in time. But you can only do that while you're in the classroom. What happens
Yes.
outside the classroom is something we're always mitigating.
Yeah. So that would need a culture shift
Yeah.
entirely. And it kind of reflects our society to an extent. It reflects what we see in the workplace as well, where everything is stratified. And I mean, the school is a microcosm of our society. And so we stratify there, and they are students going to society, and it continues, who makes it to this particular university.
Yeah.
And yes, and oh boy, I've got stories. But I remember when my daughter was thinking about going to university, and she went to a fair, and a university fair, and she went over to Oxford just to check it out. And the responses I'm not going to repeat it here because I've now named the university, was not very pleasant. And when she came home, I had to rebuild her self-esteem. And today she's a very successful young woman. So it is so important that we remove those unconscious biases, from the university level all the way down, and approach our students as individuals. And that's going to take a whole culture shift as well. So yeah, there we go. So sometimes in education, we reinforce some of the stereotypes.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah. And the stigma that we attach to certain social groups as well. So, Nikki, what changes, if you could, would you recommend to schools considering a shift away from ability grouping? Because based on our discussion, I can tell that you see where ability groupings, they do have their purpose and they can be successful. But what recommendations would you give schools if they're thinking, right, we're just going to mix everybody up? What should they put in place first?
I think the caveat is that I'm a Senko. And so I spent a lot of my time thinking about that end of significant need. And I know that the graduated response, the universal offer, doesn't always meet needs, you see. And I think that a school has to make a decision that if they are going to look at ability to inform decision making around how they create sets or ability groups, that it is not the be all and end all. It is not the blunt force tool. It's not fait accompli. And there has to be a lot of thought into how those classes are designed and what teachers are going to be put in front of those students. It's the first part of a very, very complex conversation, and it has to be a whole school approach. And there has to be times to review it, to explore the unconscious biases, to look at how the cohorts are doing. Are we replicating, inequities? But there is some argument for, I think, having a discussion around ability and how we're going to design our classes. Do I think that that's how the entire population needs to be structured at the beginning, at the end of their education? I don't think so. I think it needs to be looked at in a more kind of constructive way. And I think there needs to be things that are problematized. So, for example, I get the privileged position of seeing what an assessment at the point of entry is. Now, ours is extreme. You might assume that students that come to the PRU, even though I said a lot of them have got significant needs, there are some students that are extremely bright.
Yeah.
Right. So, but they'll arrive and they'll sit and do their CATS assessments and their literacy screeners. They might be high when they're doing them. They might have had but
I didn't mean to laugh. Yeah.
Well,
some of the things we face as teachers.
Yeah. I mean, it's a Saturday night sometimes at 9:00 in the morning on any given Monday at our school. If you looked at the substance misuse that our students are undertaking, that's probably another discussion. But the point I'm making is that the way that they interact with those assessments, as well as the assessments themselves, need to be viewed as that they are screeners. They are not the sum total of the child.
Yes.
But actually there has to be a mechanism in which we review and reflect on what is going on. And I mean, we're used to, in alternative provision world and in PRU world, to looking at complex and co-occurring needs and doing constant reviewing of progress, both emotionally with their families and academically. And it's something that I think that schools need to apply as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Continue, Nikki.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the idea of a cognitive ability test, I mean, it's not sort of something that's groundbreaking to say, but there's inbuilt biases in those assessments as well. I mean, the SATS exams have had a lot of scrutiny about the kind of ethnocentricity of them, and so on. So I think that they have to look at what they are doing, what they are using to set around ability or make these sorts of decisions about cohorts and how they look like in different subject areas. Because as I said at the start, I had absolutely no idea why I was in a top set. No idea.
Yeah.
No idea. No. Didn't know.
Well, we would want to hope that these days there is some meaning behind it, or they've got some tangible reasons. So my head of department is actually online way past his bedtime because I'm in Dubai. But he summed it up really well. He says he agrees that there needs to be a whole school approach. A strong ethos is crucial to ensuring all children have the ability to learn without any ceilings. And this must be reiterated from top down. He also agreed as well that staff must adopt a shared language across departments to ensure a consistent message. And that is so important. And you spoke earlier about the teacher in the staff room who was very negative about the lower ability students. And so that all students can soar and aspire to greatness. And we need to pass on our very own passion to these young people as well, and help to motivate and inspire them as well. Completely agree. Thank you for that, Remy. We're going to take another short break and then listen to the news. And when we come back, we'll be rounding up the discussion. So let me just thank Nikki again for such an informative session tonight so far. It's been so much to think about and to take away. Just to sum up this section that we've done, we're saying if we want to have mixed ability groups across all school setting, we need to think about the teacher in front of our students, the curriculum design. We need to think about the school ethos and the culture and make sure that we nurture all our young people. Those of you who are still with us, thank you so much. And do stay tuned. Think about your own schooling as well. And if you're a teacher, what's been your experience? Do share with us, and we'll be back in a few minutes.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Meet USA Study, your one-stop platform for guiding students through their college application journey. Access up-to-date resources on universities, programs, scholarships, and application requirements, all in one place. Get easy-to-access tools, personalised timelines, expert tips, application templates, and exclusive webinars with admissions officers to help your student stand out. Visit usastudy.co.uk or call Phil at 0800 612 8271 because every student deserves the opportunity to shine with USA Study.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
BBC News reports on changes to apprenticeships. Businesses employing adult apprentices will now, according to the DfE, have the power to decide whether a maths and English qualification should be part of the prescribed course. This could mean 10,000 more apprentices are able to complete courses every year. According to the news site, more than 90,000 people over the age of 19 began apprenticeships between August and October 2024. However, more than 45% of apprentices drop out of schemes without completing the course. This is according to recent official DfE figures. The government said it hoped that relaxing the rules for apprentices over the age of 19 will ensure more students are both applying for and completing apprenticeships, in sectors particularly where there continues to be high demand, such as healthcare, social care and construction. Apprentices aged 16 to 18 will still have to complete an English and Maths functional skills qualification, equivalent to a GCSE, as a course requirement. The government has also confirmed plans to reduce the minimum duration of an apprenticeship from 12 months to 8 months from August 2025. The move has also been welcomed by many businesses, who say it will help employers fill skills gaps more quickly. Whilst failing to secure a qualification in maths or English is one of the key reasons apprentices do not complete courses, an education think tank is also quoted in the article as saying poor quality schemes are also a factor. The chief executive of Lifetime, England's largest apprenticeship provider, welcomed the changes, but also said he was disappointed the change was not fully extended to apprentices aged 16 to 18. Full details and comments from those following the current apprenticeship courses can be found on the BBC News website. Schools Week carries an opinion piece on workload and changes to Ofsted, focusing in particular on the impact changes and developments can have on staff who work in and leaders of small schools. The piece by the head teacher of a primary school highlights the fact that Department for Education and Ofsted have the same expectations of a school, regardless of its size. The article focuses on the outcome of a Freedom of Information request submitted to Department for Education about the statutory roles a school is required to have a named person for, and a list of the roles it is good practice to have a named person for. The response from the Department for Education, as quoted in the piece, was, "The department holds the information you requested, but it is being withheld because the department is not required to provide information in response to a request if it is already reasonably accessible to you." However, the piece goes on to say that having accessed all of the documentation on the Statutory Guidance for Schools website and running them through an AI program to see how long it would take a human to read them, the outcome was concerning: between 29 and 40 days of uninterrupted work. The article closes with a concern that the information itself is actually not reasonably accessible, and that perhaps finding staff to complete the statutory roles is similarly challenging. In Wales Online, a story about Saturday detentions is featured. Those of a certain age will remember the film The Breakfast Club, which focused on an unlikely mix of students forced to spend a Saturday together after behaviour incidents in school. In Wales, however, a school led by a man dubbed Wales's strictest headmaster, where staff had previously been on strike over physical and verbal abuse from pupils, has just introduced the weekend detentions. The head teacher has said the decision was made because other forms of discipline had not been effective. According to the article, the school has also introduced other creative ways of disciplining pupils, including on some occasions asking their parents to attend class and sit next to them. Poorly behaved pupils have also been asked to carry out supervised litter picking. It's not the first time the school has made media headlines. In the past, it has also featured in the news for enforcing strict uniform policies. Further details can be found on Wales Online. Finally, the Nigerian Guardian reports that a Lagos-based educational institution has unveiled a campus in the UK. The campus will provide English language upskilling courses, leadership training, summer camps for students aged between 10 and 17, and a pre-master's programme for graduates seeking academic refinement before enrolling in UK universities. Speaking at the official launch of the campus at the residence of British Deputy High Commissioner, representatives of the school praised the school's expansion, saying it served as a bridge connecting cultures, ideas and aspirations, and that it symbolised a shared vision for an education system that transcends borders. The British Deputy High Commissioner to Nigeria also highlighted the importance of fostering trade between Nigeria and the UK. Further details can be found online. This has been Teachers Talk Radio News with Jo Fox.
Thank you very much, Joe, and very interesting news there. I could create a couple of shows out of the items that were.
I bet.
Just,
Gosh.
oh my goodness, the Saturday detention and all these things.
My
They've
God.
been around. They've been around. They've been around. It's nothing new, to be honest. But then, don't you think the teachers are also being punished coming in on a Saturday?
I don't think that school in Wales is thinking reflexively about their ability groupings, I can tell you that.
Oh no, I bet you it's the lower ability kids who are doing litter picking as well.
It seems to be this is the fad, isn't it? You know, we get this kind of draconian approach, and then it just it's like bursts and, you know, boom and bust with that approach.
And then it fizzles out, and then something else. But it's so important. And I had a show before where my guest talked about getting to the core of the problem and understanding the problem before we make these decisions, because we're only putting a plaster over it, and the problem is still there, festering underneath. Anyway, welcome back, everybody. This is the last 7 minutes of our show. Oh my goodness, I could continue all night, Nikki, because there is so much to talk about, especially when it comes to the social inequities that set sometimes help to proliferate. But last couple of questions to round up the show. I know I was going to ask you about technology, but I'm going to skip that one and just ask, do you think the future of education will move away from ability grouping entirely? Why or why not? Do you think groupings are here to stay.
Well, I mean, look at the school in Wales. It seems to me that things become extremely punitive really quickly whenever there's a crisis.
Yes.
I think that ability groupings is part and parcel of that, so it will be a school that's coasting, or a school that's having difficulties around their behaviour, and then what we need is to become punitive. And I think that a total fait accompli ability grouping, this is what your SATs was, this is where you're going to be forevermore, amen. I think that they're not going anywhere because of the nature of these sorts of punitive fads, and then on the other hand, you have the kind of more trauma-informed movements in education, which are usually part and parcel with mixed ability settings. So I just think that they're not going anywhere, but the future will be definitely a mixed economy and a mixed approach to how schools are structured and run.
Yeah, we need a complete reform and overhaul, I think.
Yeah.
And I think mixed ability groups can work, and I think settings can also work. But at somewhere along the line, we need to have a mindset shift as well
Yeah.
in the stigma that we attach to these groups. And as I said, it continues into our society, and it's not just settings within school, but settings between schools and which school you attend, like the grammar schools, and then, the kids who are considered, in quotes, failure, then they go to the comprehensive school in that particular community. And so it continues.
It does
And
continue. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's an interesting school in our local area that's oversubscribed. Everyone in the community wants to go, but it has a very rigid approach when it comes to ability,
Okay.
and it has a very rigid approach when it comes to behaviour. And yet it is adored by the local community, and their reading ages are high. They're doing, the results that they publish are very, very good. I mean, you could probably interrogate that in any different which way, but I suppose that as educators, what we know and what we feel is good practice is sometimes not met with the same feeling with people in outside of education, so
Yeah, because they experience education and that's their interpretation of it.
yeah. And you think
Yeah.
about prison reform, and you think about sort of those sorts of areas. You have that kind of pro punishment, pro sort of incarceration, and it's like the kind of Cinderella story, isn't it, with education? Like when things become more punitive, then education policies seem to follow that as well. I mean,
Yeah, definitely.
it's something that's politically easier to sell, and as
Yeah.
educators, we don't necessarily agree with, and we know it's not the right thing.
Yeah, we're a strict school. Let's line up our students in the morning. Let's check that the uniform is perfect. Let's tell them all first thing in the morning. Let's yell at them first thing in the morning, and let's set the tone for the rest of the day
Look,
because they already have their backs up.
you could not pay me to stand at 8 o'clock in the morning after I've got my young children ready for school. I've got them in the car, I've got them to the breakfast club, and then now I'm screaming at my year eights to make sure that their blazers are on in the playground in the cold, and let's line up, and then let's not talk. You couldn't pay me. No, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yes, it does happen, Nikki. Now we're on the last 2 minutes, so we're going to have to round up. So you've got 30 seconds to give us one key takeaway and give our listeners one key takeaway to remember about tonight's topic. What should they go away thinking about?
I would probably say that, it can't be an absolutist approach where we have purely mixed ability and then we don't look at ability. I think that there needs to be a kind of common sense blended approach, but the investment needs to go into the staff that are in front of them, that they understand the principles of differentiation, that they're good, solid teachers, but they understand the impact of low aspiration, deficit thinking, and that they are looking at those children as though they can succeed, and they're not seeing what they can't do, but what they can do. And if it is a mixed approach, it has to be whole school. And if it's an ability-based approach, then that also needs to be whole school. But the thing that is consistent is the quality of teaching and the level of skill that that teacher has and support.
Thank you. Beautifully summed up. So for those of you who've been with us right throughout, thank you so much for joining us on Teachers Talk Radio. Nikki, thank you so much for your informative and insightful perspectives. I do appreciate that you've taken the time to share with us, and that was a very, very good discussion. Thank you so much. Listeners, thanks again for tuning in, wherever you're listening from, whether you're in Jamaica, my parents, hope you've managed to get online, my friend in Romania, everybody in the UK listening, here in the UAE as well. Thank you so much for joining. Do encourage family and friends to join us in 2 weeks' time. Thank you for your time, Nikki, and thank you for such an informative discussion.
Thank you very much.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.